Star Wars The Heart of the Jedi by Kenneth C. Flint. Chapter 6. The Heart of the Jedi? High Admiral Thrakus repeated. Are you certain of that? The replying voice came clearly through the comlink's speaker. Certain, High Admiral. I listened through a window. I heard everything perfectly. Thrakus was in the office high in the Imperial Headquarters Tower. This time he was alone, but for General Cantos. The two sat together at the big desk. A playing board with tapered figures of silver and gold that was set up between them went neglected now, as they listened to the report. And you've no question that what you've heard was true, Tharkus said. Absolutely it is, replied the voice, and very important to him. He came straight here so swiftly I barely found a way to follow him. Cantos leaned in, pressing the mute button on the communicator console. He addressed his superior confidentially. Sir, can he be trusted? I would and have bet my survival on it, Tharkus assured. The Dios Koroi are my finest agents, totally unstoppable. How can that be? The general asked skeptically. They're quite a rare species who possess the ultimate in camouflage. Their molecular construction allows them to absorb vast amounts of energy from their surrounding atmosphere and transmute it to matter of any form. They are the ultimate imposters, taking on the guise of any being they wish. Shapeshifters, Cantos exclaimed. Like Claudites? But not limited to human form. More like the Shido, of which they are an exiled branch. Since we've known of their existence, most of the Shiido have maintained neutrality in the affairs of the Republican Empire. The Dios Koroi hold no such compunctions. That's why I set one of them spying within their new rebel base, hoping for some break. This might be it. He punched the button again and spoke into a microphone. Pollux, what is he doing now? I don't know, sir, the voice said. Just hold a moment, I'll check. On the planet Tatooine, the helmeted and orange-suited figure climbed from the cockpit of his X-Wing and dropped to the ground. The little ship sat in a small level patch atop a ridge. Rocky outcrops along the edge made the fighter invisible from below. One called Pollux walked to the edge and climbed onto a boulder to peer cautiously down. Just below the hut of Ben Kenobi was half visible beneath its drift of sand. Just below, the hut of Ben Kenobi was visible beneath its drift of sand. In the open area beyond could be seen the other X-Wing, the tiny figures of Luke and R2 moving about by it. Pollux lifted the macro binoculars hung around his neck and peered through them. Between the upper and lower readout bands was a clear, close image of man and droid. R2 stood by, watching his master rummaging through a storage compartment in the ship's side. The area was small, stored materials crammed in. Luke was struggling a bit to get something out. At last, he jerked a fat duffel bag free and tossed it on the ground. But clearly, this wasn't his sole goal. He plunged back in, shoving things around some more, and finally pulled something else free. It appeared to be most unremarkable. A board-like object, some 3 inches thick, 5 feet long, rounded at one end and squared at the other. But from the reaction of the Admiral's watching spy, it was something significant. Pollux immediately lowered his glasses and jumped from the rock, trotting back to his ship. He clambered quickly up into the cockpit to resume his subspace radio link with Tharkus. High Admiral, he said urgently. It appears he's preparing to travel. He's just unpacked a hover scooter from his ship. Not traveling by X-Wing? Tharkus said with some surprise. Where's he going then? He needs a bowl that was stolen, Pollux explained. He spoke of the Sand People. They're notorious raiders and thieves here. If they took the object, my guess is he's going after them. To retrieve a bowl, said Tharkus. Why? It holds a clue to finding the planet, sir. Ah, Tharkus said, understanding. Well then, stay with him, Pollux. Report on where he goes. If necessary, give him help without his knowing it, of course. We will see that Skywalker reaches this Angorathea of his. Yes, High Admiral, Pollux said briskly. Transmission out. As he was shutting off his radio link, his High Admiral was doing the same. Tharkus Arcus turned to look at Kantos, a gleam of satisfaction in his eye. This is certainly our chance. This is certainly our chance, General, he said with force. A chance to defeat the rebels, after all. Kantos shook his head. I don't know, sir. How can following Skywalker do that? If what Pollux heard is true, this Heart of the Jedi is a direct access to his power. It might be the way he taps into this force of his. If we could seize it for ourselves... A note of longing came into his voice. Why, we might even turn it into our use. Think, Kantos. What a weapon we'd have then. Nothing could stop us. But what if we can't use it? The other inquired. Then we destroy it, Darkus said ruthlessly, and Skywalker with it. In one move, we wipe out the Force's only champion and shut off its source. Either way, the Jedi threat will be truly erased. The Force will no longer aid the enemy's side, and without that, there'll be no match for us. He picked up one of the slender pieces, contemplating it gloatingly. The game will be in our hands once more. With Skywalker out of the picture, our people will again be convinced that we can win. Support will come to us, and with our full strength rallied, we will strike. He slammed the piece down on the board with a force that rattled its fellows. Probably too hard. A little softer. There, that's more like it. But what of the Senate, sir? Kantos reminded. Their peace initiative? They're preparing to leave for the rendezvous right now. Darkus considered this for a moment. We can't let those misguided fools sell the Empire into bondage before our plan bears fruit. No, he said decisively. That meeting must not take place. You would move against the senators? Astonished Kantos asked. Darkus waved dismissively. Their act is traitorous, the worst kind of treachery. I've no compunction about eliminating them if need be. That won't be so easy. The meeting place is a guarded secret, known only within their ranks. They don't trust the military at all. Never mind, said Darkus. He gave a sinister little smile. I've some ideas about that as well. Very soon our senators will fall. With that, he swept a hand through the midst of the pieces, cutting a wide swath across the board as they toppled aside. No? A little bigger break here. As in a double line. Luke Skywalker picked the brown leather utility belt up from the sand. He checked the supply pouches. Holstered blaster and lightsaber hung from it to be certain all were in order. Then he buckled the belt on over the wrapped tunic and trousers he now wore. These simple garments of a lightweight beige material had replaced his flight suit and uniform. They were much like the clothes he had worn there in his youth, standard garb on the primitive desert planet. As he fastened the belt and settled it about his waist, he spoke in patient explanation to the little droid sitting close by. I know you want to come with me, R2, but there just isn't any way. The scooter's too small and I can go faster alone. Besides, it's too dangerous in the desert for you. It's best that you stay here. With the belt adjusted, the young man took up a long, hooded robe of dark and coarse-woven material, slipping it on. R2 beeped and whistled back to him in tones of clear dejection. Of course I still need you, R2, Luke answered it assuringly. Just not this time. With the baggy robe on and wrapped about him, the belt with its weapons were well hidden. He stepped away to the X-Wing. Hover scooter's base was the round-ended flat piece he had fished from storage. It looked much like a speeder, but was too small for a cockpit, seats, or full controls. Instead, a simple handlebar affair stuck up on a curved rod from just behind the little bow. Braking and accelerator controls mounted at its grip. The whole apparatus floated in place some foot above the ground. Luke gave it a once-over, then stepped aboard, placing his feet in shallow depressions halfway back and gripping the handlebars. The scooter sank a bit as it took his weight, but swiftly recovered. Stay close to the ship, R2, Luke admonished. But if there's a storm, get inside. You don't want sand in your works. I'll be back as soon as I can. On that promise, he gave one grip a twist. With a soft hum of power, the vehicle started forward, gliding across the sand. Luke gave the droid a backward wave and cranked the power higher, sending the scooter shooting away. Behind him, R2 looked after him with its single lens eye. A low sound came from it that sounded distinctly like a lost puppy's whine. Above the droid, Pollux stared down at the scene through his glasses. He lowered them and scrambled to his feet as Luke flashed away at ever-increasing speed across the open desert, shrinking swiftly to a dot. He cast down the glasses and stood poised a moment, body drawing up stiffly and growing taut. Then a glow rose above him, an aura of blue-white light, growing in an instant to a brilliant chrysalis. It enveloped his body, swallowing all of its form but a vague shadow. That shadow seemed to vibrate, grow softer, turn fluid, and change. And even though much obscured by the glow, the alteration was a grotesque one, as the human shape contorted and stretched, changing to something else, angular and large. It was a swift change, though, and in seconds that glow was fading, unveiling the transformed being that now stood there. It appeared to be a flying scavenger of the Tatooine wastelands known as an Iktar, a large, scaly creature of pointed bill and peaked head, the diurnal counterpart of the sandbat. It stood on splayed, taloned feet. What seemed a shawl enwrapping it unfurled to reveal leathery wings as the being stretched them out to their full, wide spread. The thing strode forward and boldly launched itself from a pinnacle of rock, sailing into space. The wings caught the air to glide it well free of the ridge. Then they began to flap. Being's powerful muscles pumping rhythmically to send it up higher, higher, as it soared away. It followed after the receding form of the young Jedi, the shadow of its ominous shape slithering across the rippling sands. The baggage train snaked through a maze of ships and machines as it zipped across the hangar floor, heading for the Millennium Falcon's repair bay. While a ground crew saw to the big hoses satisfying the ship's energy needs, Han Solo himself stood by the gangway, overseeing the loading of supplies needed to fuel the passengers. One train of supplies was already parked there, men unloading cargo from their cars and carrying it up to the ramp. Solo checked off items on his computerized clipboard as they went by. He stopped one man going by with an unmarked crate. "Hold on. What's that?" "Magnethalon energy bars," the man replied. "We've got 10 cases here." "Energy bars?" Solo repeated, making a face of disgust. "They taste like tar-coated gravel. Haven't you got some fried pancot chips or Tanis rolls? You know, the cream-filled ones?" "The princess only ordered these," the man said. "She said they were the most healthy and nutritious." "That figured," Han said glumly. He waved the man ahead. "Go on, take him aboard." As the man went on, he muttered, "This is going to be one long trip." He looked around for the next man in line, but his attention was drawn away by two others who had entered the bay and were approaching. It was Princess Leia accompanied by a man. They were walking close together, warmly engaged in conversation. She laughed aloud at some comment of his, her voice bright with sincere amusement. As the pair reached Han, he gave the man a once-over. Even the untailored Alliance uniform couldn't disguise that Leia's new companion was a strappingly built fellow of slender waist and broad shoulder, topping Solo's height by half a head. He was also somewhat younger in look and distinctly more handsome, cleanly featured, with a well-chiseled nose, bold thrust of deep-cleft chin, and wide forehead. His thick, curling hair was a jet-black hue, his wide-set eyes clear, sky-blue. He moved with both a noble's grace and an athlete's unconscious litheness. Solo finished his first assessment and looked at her. "Well, sweetheart," he drawled, "I was wondering when you'd get around to helping out." Her lips pursed in disapproval at his use of the personal nickname while she was in her official capacity with a stranger. Her reply was pointedly impersonal. "I'm afraid I have to leave the loading preparations to you, General Solo. I'm rather busy with other things now." "So I noticed." Solo looked at the other man once over. "Who's this?" "I am Goen of Galvoni III. That one swiftly volunteered in a gracious way. He thrust out a hand to shake. "Most honored to meet you, General Solo. I've Heard much of your brave exploits. Yeah, sure, Solo said, thrown somewhat off guard by his amiable manner. He took the hand. Glad to meet you. Gowen's father is King Caladan of his planet, Leia supplied. That right, Han said to him. I suppose that makes you a prince. He threw Leia a little crooked smile. Looks like I'm sort of surrounded. Oh, that's not important, Han, she told him lightly. What is important is that Gowen's family was closely tied to the Old Republic. His grandfather was Galvoni's senator, and he's been brought up with enormous skill and vast experience in diplomacy. The light of realization dawned in Solo's eyes. You mean he's going with us? Why, of course, she replied, a little puzzled by his response. You don't think I'd be negotiating for the whole alliance alone? Gowen is very respectable on both sides. He'll be a great asset. Please, Leia, the younger man said modestly. You make too much of me. My talents are minor compared to your own. Gowen, you're only saying that to be courteous, she graciously returned. What you've accomplished for the Alliance, why, just talking the Tenolans and the Fundal into joining us was miraculous. Let's call it equal, he told her, giving her a broad, gleaming grin, which he then turned to Solo. You know, I look forward to having a most rewarding relationship with Leia, he announced, laying a hand upon her arm in an easy, familiar manner. We have a most astonishingly similar background. I'm amazed we haven't met before. He looked back to her, adding earnestly, very disappointed, too. Han eyed the hand in a jaundiced way. He noticed that Leia did nothing to move it off. Well, looks like you'll have time to catch up, he told them both dryly. If you'll excuse me now. He began to turn away, but Leia stopped him. Wait, where's 3PO? I wanted Gowen to meet him too. Gee, that's too bad, Solo returned offhandedly. Chewie had to take the day transport over to, Eskandrin City, find a spare dispersal rotor. I sent 3PO along to pick up some other stuff. Liquor, mostly. You know, they don't keep any of that here. You mean you send a protocol droid out to do errands? Gowen asked in astonishment. Han shrugged. Hey, a droid's a droid. Leia stopped towards him, Gowen's hand falling away. Han, we are supposed to be leaving in 24 hours, she pointed out in a low but firm tone, clearly a bit vexed. I'm responsible for this mission, you know. Don't get your braids in a tangle, Your Highness, he advised calmly. They'll be back in time. And as she opened her mouth to retort, he raised a hand to say her. Sorry, no more time for a chat now. Got my fun little jobs to do. See ya, folks. With that, he wheeled from them and strode away, not looking back. A very long trip, he growled under his breath. The two looked after him, Leia with frustration, Gowen quizzically. Imagine sending a droid of that caliber on such a menial task, he commented, shaking his head. He looked at her. If you don't mind me saying so, Leia, your friend has a rather crude way around him. Han's got some rough edges, all right, she agreed, with a certain regret. Then she turned to Gowen. But never mind him, she said more brightly. I just hope that 3PO gets back soon, so I can tell him he's coming along as part of our negotiating team. Fetching cheap Fargan ale for Master Solo, C-3PO grumbled as he walked along, nearly staggering beneath the burden of a large case. How thoroughly degrading! Pushed his way ahead through the crowded streets of a warren-like city, whose diverse jumble of structures spread around him. The erratic, narrow streets were half clogged with market stalls, where shouting vendors raised a cacophony of shrill sales pitches. The space between them was a vast milling throng of beings, ranging from the very human to the extremely non-human, all rubbing elbows and other odd bits of anatomy as they forced their way along. I mean, this really is the depths for me, the disgruntled droid went on, and being of my great erudition, trained in etiquette, instructed in over 6 million forms of communication, here to play the slave for such an unappreciative human as he. Why, even that great hairy beast of a Wookiee has more exalted tasks than I. Well, just let me tell you, if I had my own way. He had no chance to finish. From the shadows of an alley, a black cloaked figure suddenly appeared. They grabbed the droid and roughly dragged him back. The dropped case of ale crashed to the ground. "Oh dear, what's happening?" 3PO cried in a voice rising higher with growing alarm. "Who are you? Wait, this must be a mistake. You have the wrong droid. Please listen. No, no, no!" The last screamed word was cut off as he was shoved through a doorway. The metal portal swung closed behind him with a final sounding clang.